Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing? That sounds like a few people have been on a few nights out in a row, doesn't it? Last day of TWT. I hope you've all been having an amazing time. I'm really excited to be joining you today. This is my first panel at TWT. So those of you that haven't had to come across my face yet, I'm Jess Barnard. I'm the chair of Young Labour. It's great to meet you all. And I'm going to ask the panellists to just quickly introduce yourselves, just who you are, what you do, where you're from.
Hello, is this on? My name's Keir Milburn. I think I'm on this panel even though I'm 20 years older than everyone else because I wrote a book called Generation Left. I also do the ACFM podcast on Zarah. I also do political games, which we did together yesterday, which was quite fun. Yeah, that's me.
Hiya, I'm Caitlin Alexandra Lee. I'm from Glasgow. I'm the branch chair of Unite Hospitality and Services.
Hi, my name is Abdullah. I'm also on the Young Labour National Committee, recently elected BAME officer, and I'm also the co-founder of Sheffield Black Lives Matter.
Morning, everyone. Hi, my name is Zarah, Sultana. I'm the Labour Member of Parliament for Coventry South.
Thanks so much for joining us, you guys. So, in case you hadn't guessed, this session is on Generation Left. Now, you've probably kind of heard that term thrown around. So we're going to be talking a little bit about what that is. What does it mean? Are young people all socialists? What are we going to be doing? What do we have to do? And so we're going to be exploring that through the session. So, I mean, most of us probably felt quite enthused when a certain politician, whose name I probably don't need to say, I'm going to say anyway, Jeremy Corbyn, came to the forefront of the Labour Party and inspired so many young people and brought a vision of hope that things could be different and things could change. And for the first time, young people were like so excited at the prospect of a politician doing something a bit different. Who would have thought that that's possible? And so young people are overwhelmingly looking for something to change. Now, I'm going to start with, a question for the panel. Why is it that young people are so desperate for something to change? Why do you think young people are looking for answers in socialism?
I like the way the mic suddenly made its way down. I mean, I don't know how long you want this answer. I can give you a 40-minute answer, but I'll give you a 5-minute one. I mean, basically because the prospects and living standards of young people have been fucked over the last 10 to 20 years. And there are sort of complex reasons for that. You know, and so we should say that it's true on the other side as well. Older people are sort of tending to go to the right. It's not a clear pattern around the world. It depends on the sort of economy that's going on in your country. And then it also depends on somebody giving political expression to the experiences that young people and older people have. So there's a division, and I think the way we should think about it is it's a division in the working class. To a large degree, it's a division in the working class. And when we talk about these sorts of things, older people are moving to the right or younger people are moving to the left, whenever we talk about large groups of people, and we link it to some sort of political action, you know, we're not saying everybody in that group of people are moving in the same way. There are a large minority of older people who are on the left, and in fact they make a rather important, you know, a key element of our movement. And if you just walk around, you know, left events, you will see that there are younger people and there are older people, and the people who tend to be missing are sort of my age people, that sort of like Gen X generation. And there are reasons for that, and the reasons are, you know, that was a period of real defeat for the left. And a lot of people of my generation learned a lesson that change couldn't happen. But then something happened in 2008 which changed that. 2008 put an end to that world from the mid of the 1990s. Unfortunately, the people who control the Labour Party now, they're trapped in a generational problem. They're trapped in the 1990s. They're trapped in the long 90s. They haven't realised how much things have changed since 2008, and they haven't realised that world is no longer possible, basically. And what happened in 2008 was there was a financial crisis. But behind that financial crisis, that was sparked by a housing crisis. And we can see that this is part of a longer trend. There's been long economic trends and long sort of demographic trends. There's a demographic aging, so we're having less babies. Sorry, women having less babies, or the birth rate has fallen off dramatically, which means that the society as a whole gets older. But at the same time, there's a split in the economy has moved in a direction where asset ownership becomes a much, much more important part of the economy than it used to be. And in fact, your ownership of assets, what you own, is probably going to have a more important role in determining how your life goes than your income from work. So what you own becomes more important than what you do, right? That's a trend that has generational implications, partly because the welfare state, the way the welfare state was dismantled by neoliberalism, selling off council houses, the right to buy, etc., it meant that a couple of generations had access to housing, and then particularly from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s, the price of housing and other assets like shares just went through the roof at the same time as wages stagnated. And so now you have sort of two economies. You have an asset economy and you've got a work economy. And young people are trapped in a work economy and wages are stagnating and their living standards are going down. In 2008, what happened was the idea that if you just played by the rules as a young person, you would get this nice neoliberal life, get a house, you get wealthier. That just stopped becoming believable. And when that stops becoming believable, that young people become open for another story about a different sort of future. So that's not an automatic thing, right? Somebody has to give that story. And we were very lucky because I think Jeremy Corbyn did give that story in the UK. I think Bernie Sanders gave that story in the US. And I've probably talked too long now. Yes, let's leave it there. But that's the picture as far as I can see it.
Firstly, I'm having flashbacks of singing Backstreet Boys' I Want It That Way on this stage right now. But in particular, my political journey was shaped by a lot of things that Keir was talking about. Growing up as a young Muslim during the war on terror, and then being shaped by austerity, then the tripling of tuition fees and the scrapping of grants, going to university, being saddled with a lot of debt, and then entering the job market, and there weren't that many jobs, so having to go to the job centre, work in retail, in low-waged work, and realising that neoliberal dream that I had been promised my whole life didn't exist, and that was quite a shocker. And I think that's what made Jeremy's leadership so exciting, because he was speaking to the material interests of our generation. He was talking about free education, and he had been involved with the free education movement through the National Union of Students, like coming to our events, coming to campaigns, supporting students, fighting for that. And then he was speaking about the housing crisis. Young people are giving overwhelmingly most of their income to really dodgy, terrible, messed up landlords. And when we look at the kind of jobs they're in, they're often working, again, in low-wage work. And when we look at who's owning assets, like he was talking about, it's not young people. But I think it's really important not to fall into the trappings of making it young people versus elderly people, because what we're seeing now is that class is being shaped by this age composition. And young, there are loads of elderly people also trapped in poverty, and we see that especially during the winter. And it's really important that we look at these issues as issues that are affecting our class, and we fight collectively, because otherwise we're playing off each other, and that falls into that divide and rule bullshit that the Tories and the political elite love to use. So I think it's really important that we focus on that, and I think that's where the Labour Party is going wrong. I don't think that they just aren't listening to young people. I think they're deliberately ignoring young people because they don't understand the impact of our vote, and they don't truly appreciate the power that we have. And in 2017, we could have got into government, we didn't, but it's really important that we don't lose sight of what we can and still will win. And I think that's what I want to say on that.
Thank you, Zarah. Before we go to the next speaker, speaking of ignoring young people, I'm going to come to Abdullah now. Not only are you experiencing being ignored by some people within our own party as a member of the Young Labour National Committee, but also, you've been absolutely fundamental in the Black Lives Matter movement in Sheffield. So I guess what I'd like, could you tell us a little bit about that? But also, how do we connect movements that are predominantly, young people angry at injustice, taking action against injustice? How do we connect them with party politics when senior politicians call them things like a moment rather than a movement?
Hi again, my name is Abdullah. So I'll start in terms of how I got involved, and the way how I got involved was in 2016, there was a huge amount of protests going on because of the killing of particularly young black men in the US, but also bringing it back to what's actually happening here in the UK, where at least one person a week dies at the hands of police or in prison. Since 1990, there's not been a single conviction for a police officer in the UK. So for me, it was in 2016, we just had enough, and there was a lot of young people who, approached me and asked me, "Here, what we're going to do? We need to do something," because even our council wasn't really reacting to it, apart from empty gestures through statements. And when they changed the lights during the evenings, when George Floyd passed away. So we just had enough. So we came together, a few of us, and we decided, let's put it to social media, see who wants to come out, who wants to protest. So we put it out, we protested, we came out, and we were actually surprised. Like the first protest we had in 2016, we had about almost 2,000 people come in, and by the time the protest was still ongoing, we had a huge amount of police presence, and we had so many news channels coming, Sky, and everyone basically came out. And then in 2020, we had the same thing with George Floyd, and this time we were really pissed off because the fact that, another person on camera getting killed for 9 minutes as well, and not enough has been done. So this time when we did organize the protest, before we were getting a lot of harassments from police, we were getting a lot of harassment from members in the council, and we weren't getting the support that we needed in terms of expressing our anger for the fact that Black lives truly don't matter to the elitists in our society, and those who follow them, they don't support our movement either. So it did really piss us off when we saw, Keir Starmer, or should I say Keir Starmer, when he, called our movement as a moment and tried to say that we're not having this issue here in the UK, and that it's just an issue in America. When this guy explicitly has been working with the police, in his former job, and has been a prosecutor who's prosecuted or has been involved in prosecuting black people. So he has no right to be attacking our movement and calling it as a moment. And the gesture where he took the knee, but then we don't even know what's happening with the Ford report. We don't know what's going on in terms of them tackling institutional racism within the police force, but also within the Labour Party. Look at the likes of Diane Abbott, how she's been treated. Until now, there's nothing been done in terms of making it an open space for, black and brown leaders, such as Zarah, for instance, and the attacks that she's been having. Do you know what I mean? So it's just hypocritical coming from this leader and his leadership team. What I would say in terms of how we can engage with young people is listening to the young generation. And I do agree, we do need to work with our elders as well. And like Zarah said, it's not a fight between the younger and the older generation. It's a fight in terms of class, when we're seeing that the working class, they are trying to get us to fight against each other. And I'm not sure if you've seen the photo of, who holds the most cookies, and then you're looking at the immigrant who has one little crumb of the cookie. So I think how we can engage and get people involved within the party, or even organizing within the socialist movement, is understanding what are the issues that are affecting our communities. I got involved because when we were talking about Black Lives Matter on the street, when we were protesting, who 2 weeks later after we had the protest, who came all the way from London to Sheffield? It was Jeremy Corbyn who came. He asked to meet with us, and we did meet with him. And I'm not sure if you've seen it, but I really hate doing this, but during me talking to him, I didn't even realize it was recorded, but during me speaking to Jeremy Corbyn, I got really emotional, and I spoke about personal stuff that was affecting me and my family. And I never was able to do that to any leader or any individual who's a politician, because he's a different politician. He listens to us, he campaigns for us, and what we're seeing now with Keir and his team is just bullshit. Really, we're not seeing actions, and it's done on purpose. They don't want to listen to the young people because they don't care about the young people, and that's why we have to campaign. We have to be active. And what I would say to our allies and comrades is that, when you see that there's an issue happening in terms of, black or brown people are excluded in spaces where are meant to be left off for socialist or what's we need to acknowledge the issues that they are facing, that we are facing, because if we don't come together, then unfortunately we're going to lose this battle.
That's a hard act to follow. Before I bring in Caitlin, I guess just to set the scene, last night at the Tribune rally, I said something along the lines of, our socialism didn't start in 2017 with Jeremy Corbyn, but he managed to represent a lot of the things that we were kind of crying out for, that we believed in. But our socialism can't end with, Jeremy Corbyn. It has to continue. We have to continue the fight. We have to keep building. We have to get organised. So it feels fitting to bring you in now to tell us about what you're doing to organise young people in the workplace in such precarious work and conditions.
Yeah. So I'm quite new to activism. It was during the global pandemic, in 2020, my hotel made the decision to make 95% of the workforce redundant. This didn't need to happen because there was furlough. So it was quick, get people involved, join a union, and we need to fight back against this. We were already unhappy. We're already on 0-hour contracts. We're already on minimum wage and having to deal with a ridiculous amount of sexual harassment, our tips being stolen. We had all these issues, but the acute thing was we didn't know how we were going to be able to pay for our rent, how we were going to be able to get another job because hospitality wasn't open. So it was a really, really difficult, stressful time, but it was getting people organised in the work and speaking to them and having countless Zoom calls, so many WhatsApp groups, all that kind of stuff to say to people, we need to stop this and we have the power. Now, we managed to get 3 months, so it was going to be done in about a month. We managed to have it extended for about 3 months. Most people did lose their job and it was through fire and rehire. And that then pushed me forward to be well, that was one scenario, but the issues that we had before are still there, and there is a want for this organising and wanting better. We are the industry that has unionised the most in the past kind of year, and it is through young activists, and it is, in my branch, it's young women activists, and it's migrant workers, and it's these kind of parts of society that are by design the most exploited, that want to stand up and want to deny employers and the elite the ability to suppress us and make our situation harder. And yeah, that's
Thanks so much, Caitlin. I think it's so important, the work that the two of you are doing in connecting with young people outside of traditional political parties, making sure that we're listening to young people, we're organising with young people and meeting them where they are and facing the challenges that they are facing. And then we've got brilliant people like Zarah representing us in Parliament, which is just incredible. Can I just, a little bit of crowd interaction, I'm really sorry, I'm going to get you moving. Could you put your hand up if you consider yourself a socialist? Well, not many of you then. Okay, hang on, keep your hands up for me. Keep your hands up if you are a member of a trade union. Ooh, guys, we've got some recruitment to do. Put your hand up again, or keep your hand up if you're a member of the Labour Party. Okay, so you see that there's a kind of, there's a bit of a theme here. we're all in this room as socialists, and many of us are already involved in trade unions, many of us are already involved in Labour Party and activism elsewhere, I'm sure. But there is, I think we should touch on, there is increasingly a concerning rise in the radicalisation of young white men in online spaces, and that's something that is kind of, increasingly taking hold. And I just wanted to come to, I guess, Keir on this one, to, I guess, ask about this, and then perhaps, where do you think this is coming from, and perhaps what do we do about it?
Oh, it was interesting because Caitlin was saying that it's young women who are driving the uptake in unionisation, and it's true just about all around the world that young women are the most left cohort and the most radical cohort. And so even in countries where it's not so clear that there is a generation left effect, that's still true, right? And so there is a gender dimension to the generational dimension, just as there's a class dimension to the generational dimension. It's a complicated intersectional world we live in, and so there has been this sort of rise of a sort of online radicalisation and the alt-right, etc. And underlying that really is a sort of backlash against the feminist movement, really, and basically young men being unsure about how to be a young man these days, which is a genuine question. Should you be a young man these days? Unfortunately, they're getting the absolute worst possible people addressing that problem. We should be clear, though, that this is still very much a minority trend within young men, and in fact, feminist attitudes amongst young men are high. They're historically high. What we do about the radical online radicalisation is a really, really difficult problem, because it contains that whole alt-right. It contains sort of built-in sort of immunity to our politics. That's why this is the right go on about the woke agenda and all this sort of stuff, just a repeat of political correctness, etc. Is specifically to try to inoculate people so that they cannot try to think about their experiences in a different way, and that's for older people and for younger people. Because when I said there was a division or a tension in the working class between young and old, when you have divisions or tensions in the working class, you have to work out how to overcome them. You have to recognise them first and try and work out what's causing them, and then you have to try to overcome them. It's an incredibly difficult thing with the online alt-right sort of thing trend amongst young men, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Am I back on? Yeah, sorry, my mic turned off. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your contribution so far. I'm going to throw it out to the audience now. Does anyone have a question that they would like to ask our panellists? So do we have mics? Sorry. There's a mic. Can you put your hands up for me? Okay, I'm going to go.
Hi guys, what is the role of trade unions in organising young people in the workplace and beyond?
Just one at a time. Yeah, fair. I think when you say kind of role of trade unions, I think that it's the role of the workers to make the trade unions do what we need. So, for instance, I was quite heavily involved in Sharon Graham's campaign, which is bringing power back to the workforce and focusing on work, pay and conditions. And it needs to be led by the workers that are actually in the workplaces. We do need, obviously, trade union officials and stuff, but the organisers and people in a trade union need to focus on what a worker actually needs. So that's looking at things like real living wage, better conditions, getting for hospitality workers, it's getting home safe at night when you finish at 3 a.m. These are the kind of things that people need to listen to us to be demanding, and that's where trade unions need to take from it. They need to take the lead from the workers that are actually in the workplace, I would say.
Trade unions are the lifeblood of the socialist movement. They are the reason why the Labour Party exists. And when I think of my journey, especially through Unite and the Young Members Committee, I joined Unite when I was working in retail. And I should have joined Osdo, but I joined Unite at the time. And it was really important to learn about how to collectively organise. And given the fact that our education system tells us nothing about working class history, doesn't tell us about the labour movement, doesn't tell us about what we've won with the weekend, sick pay, holiday pay, maternity leave, and so forth, it falls upon us in our communities, in our movement, to educate young people, because they're not going to get it in schools. And of course, there are teachers through the NEU who try to bring that into the curriculum, which is very rigid anyway. So I think the trade unions also have to do a lot more work engaging with young people who are in precarious work, who work in workplaces that aren't traditionally heavily unionized. We don't have the same kind of economy that we did with factories where you could, unionize so quickly. People are working very difficult hours, night shifts, day shifts. People are worried about their immigration status. There's all of these issues, and I think there's a real need for trade unions to be diverse in the way that they approach this. It's a generational issue, but it's a class issue again. When we look at the makeup of unions, again, Sharon, big up Sharon, being the first woman Gen Sec of Unite. But there's a real issue, and we love unions, we want to make them better, and there's a space for more young people to get involved in union structures. We shouldn't just be limited to young members committees, we should be part of all the structures of a union. We should be organised, there should be more young stewards, there should be more young officials, more, people kind of going up within that union space. And I think then added on to the Labour Party, we need more trade unionists to also be in the Labour Party as well, because yes, we can advance the class struggle through organising workplaces, but the truth is we also need state power. If we're going to increase the national minimum wage to £15 an hour and immediately take a lot of people out of poverty, you're going to do it through the Labour Party. If you want to get rid of anti-trade union legislation, which the Labour Party needs to keep, making sure is on its manifesto, that's how you're going to do it. And then when we look at the climate emergency, which is a big issue affecting our generation disproportionately, so you're going to do that by renationalising public industries through the Labour Party, through state power. So all of these things are interlinked. We need to make sure that link between trade unions and the Labour Party is strong, and we need to make sure that the leadership understands that the Labour Party is absolutely nothing without the trade union movement.
Well, I don't know how to follow that, but what I would say is, I joined Unite just about less than a year ago, and I remember when I was working during the start of the pandemic, I was working at Amazon, and I remember speaking to migrants who they didn't even know what their rights were, because every time they needed to take a sick pay or they needed to even just take a sick leave. I remember there was one worker, she had a 2-year-old son and he was really ill, and her partner was already working and she needed to take some time off. And because Amazon, obviously we know what Amazon is like, trash. They're very trash, we know that. But then because she didn't know her rights, she wasn't able to, proceed through the process and know what she needed to do. But we were fortunate enough that myself and another person who has been part of unions before, we were able to advise her, but we wouldn't know that if we weren't involved with a trade union, if we didn't get involved ourselves. And to be honest, as much as I love trade unions, I do know that there's a lot more work that needs to be done in terms of getting black and brown communities inside the trade union and have more accessible spaces. I remember during my time as a student, I was president of my students' union, and I used to, on a regular basis, I used to work with the academics and I used to work with the trade union, but I felt very uncomfortable that I was the only black young person in that room, and sometimes that would push me away from actually attending, but because of my principles, I would still go, but I will still, from inside, I feel really uncomfortable. So I think that would be a feedback for trade unions and reps, if if there are any in this room, to take that back to your trade union, because we need to be more inclusive, we need to be more accessible, so that our members who are struggling, like the migrant who was working with me at Amazon, can get involved in their union and, you know, feel comfortable that they've got a second family that's going to protect them whilst they're at work.
And just to add to everything that Abdullah said, there are amazing new unions also forming. There's the IGWB, who are organising around Deliveroo riders and all sorts. So we also need to be supporting those campaigns whenever they happen, because while they're smaller unions and they don't have as many resources, we're all part of the same movement, and we need to be helping each other and supporting each other during these struggles.
Thank you. Speaking of £15 minimum wage, I think we probably should, mention the shameful situation that happened yesterday and offer our full solidarity to Andy McDonald, who was forced to resign from his position. Can I get some hands for questions? Okay, let me see. Can I go to this person here?
Thanks. So this question is about what Keir was talking about and the relationship between the asset and the work economy. And considering the way our democratic system works, I just can't see how the needs of Generation Left could be met through the parliamentary system without finding a policy platform that unites the needs of people in both of those economies. So I was wondering if any of the panellists could talk about what policy platform might do that.
I'm not sure I fully understood the question, but it's the real. We're sort of caught in a trap, really, that the electoral system in the UK really does. It punishes young people who move to the cities, and the generational divide turns into a geographical divide, because young people leave their home places and move to the cities because that's where the work is, etc. And so it sort of punishes that, but. How you overcome that is a real problem, right? And whether there's a sort of parliamentary and extra parliamentary thing, perhaps one way, the way I'd like to try and think of it is this: no matter what, I just can't see any of the leaders of any of the political parties doing anything apart from completely ignoring the experiences and interests of young people. And when I say young people, we're probably talking like under 40s. I mean, Labour won, had the plurality of the votes amongst the working age population, right? You know, we're not talking about 24-year-olds, we're talking about a large part of the population. And if none of the political parties or the leadership of those parties are going to express just even the experiences of the huge part of the population, well, somebody's got to do it, right? And I'll tell you what, it's got to be us. The left have got to work out ways in which we can express those interests and people can see their experiences in us. And so if we can't do it through the official policy platform of the Labour Party, well, we need our own one then, right? And we need to have forms of organisation in which young people and not so young people can see their own expression in it. So, you know, we need to reinvigorate the union movement. Right, and the sort of work that Caitlin's doing around the precarious work that young people often fall into, which is very hard to organise. You know, that's really important. We also need whole worker organising. We need sort of renters' unions, etc. We need campaigns around housing, around tenants' rights, etc. There's quite a remarkable referendum one in Berlin the other day in which properties could be expropriated from people who own too many properties and brought into public ownership. I'd like to see that in the UK, I tell you. and the other thing, of course, is climate change is this huge, it's going to dominate our lives over the next 10 to 20 years. It's going to bring change that we really haven't quite got our heads around at the moment. And there's a big generational tension in that as well, because people of my age and older, we've used up a huge amount of the carbon budget. You know, basically there's so much carbon you can put into the atmosphere before temperatures rise. And that's set. It doesn't matter whether you believe in it or not, that's just there. And we've filled up a huge amount, which means a much smaller carbon budget for younger people. And that's a tension that we have to address and overcome again, basically. And the climate change movement has got to take off and be huge, and that movement has got to be tied to the material conditions of young people, and it's got to be linked to the fact that we need to radically democratise the country. We need to democratise the economy, we need to democratise how assets are owned, right, and bring assets back into common ownership, housing back into common ownership, and you know, other assets back into common ownership. If we can tie all those things together, then you have a powerful movement that can overcome any limitations of the parliamentary system.
Okay, and any other questions? Oh, lots of options now. Can I go to this person at the back there? Navy top.
Cheers. Hello. I just wanted to ask, I think we've heard a lot about how in the wider economy young people have it much worse. But I wanted to talk about within our movements. So I'm a climate organiser, and I spent about a year and a half arguing with people, often in older generations, about why climate change is an issue, as a social issue and a justice issue and a racial issue. And I've only ever been to one Labour meeting, even though I'm a Labour member. And that meeting was dominated by people a lot older than me, whose culture of organising was completely different to anything I'd ever been a part of, that was very difficult to take part in. And I'm wondering, you know, do the movements that we're a part of also put up unnecessary barriers to young people becoming organisers and getting active? And I'm wondering if any of you guys had any practical solutions to pose about that.
Yeah, you know what, that's a really good question, because like I resonate with everything you said. So I recently got elected as youth officer for my CLP, and on my CLP, to be honest, I was very adamant to change the culture, but it's very hard when you're one person. So what I would say is it is a gradual, you know, progress, so it will take some time to change things personally, but I think we need to recruit more young people in the space so that we can have like the space to speak. We can't expect people who've been in the party for so many years or organising to change their ways like that, even if we do have some comrades who are like that. My CLP, I wouldn't say they're very socialist, to be honest. They're quite right, but which makes it a lot more difficult. But I think it is possible getting more young people who are united. So what we do is we've used, for example, the Green New Deal as a means to change the conversation in our CLP. So we've worked with our local Green New Deal in Sheffield, and we've managed to get 4 different wards in our CLPs who would never talk about these issues to pass a motion and actually work together to get a motion to the conference. So I think it is possible. It would require us, you know, not compromising, but finding out what they care about and see how we can work around that. Like when you're at work and you want to meet the KPIs of the business, then it's the same thing with people who are not on the same pathway as us, if that makes sense. So hopefully that answers the question. So working with local, so for example, for my case, I would work with the climate group that are based in Sheffield and see how we can organise through our CLPs, because if we don't get more young people involved, then unfortunately it's just not going to happen without us being in the room.
Can I say something?
So I think one of the things that's quite important to actually recognise is when you're a young activist, you are met with a lot of like difficult things to deal with, like misogyny, people like disregarding you because you are young, racism. These kind of things happen, right? And I think it's kind of like you look at the structures that are there and you think, oh, it's comrades, oh, it's my CLP, oh, it's my branch, I won't have these issues. But you do, and it's just about sometimes you need to actually challenge them. You need to be able to challenge and say when you think that there's something kind of like if there's an incidence of like misogyny. you need to be able to be, excuse me, that's absolutely out of order, and you need to kind of challenge these things, because it makes it a lot harder for people to actually be able to get involved. And I think that's one of the problems within groups and activists, is not being able to actually challenge things, because you don't think it's going to happen on the left, but it does.
So I joined the Labour Party when I was 17 under Ed Milburn, and my CLP at the time was under special measures, which was a racialised policy that the Labour Party had that predominantly affected Muslim constituents, CLPs that had a high number of Muslim members. And I tried to get involved, and because I was young and I was left-wing and I wanted to, do stuff, that was automatically something that some of the CLP officers or some of the senior people, and often there are far too many councillors who occupy CLP positions, which I think is a bit of a conflict of interest. But anyway, I just couldn't get involved, and I just didn't have support. There weren't, it was just me really, and I was politely discouraged from running for things. And when you're a young person, you can't be putting up that fight. So I had to take a different route into getting involved politically. I still carried my Labour Party card, but when I got involved with student union stuff around Palestine, around Kashmir, around free education, around Black ethnic minority association issues, I was able to find my political home in that space. So I don't want people to think that, you got to keep fighting that Labour Party barrier and just keep going and going and going until it breaks you. No, I think it's really important that you try. And if you don't, then you find another way to get involved, but you don't give up. There are other ways to always stay active. And then I guess my journey kind of went like, woo! Because I got involved with NUS stuff, and then the Labour Party's political circumstances changed in a way which allowed me and my politics to find a way to get involved in so many structures like Young Labour. So I was involved with the Young Labour National Executive, and I just want to again give full solidarity to Jess, Abdullah and Young Labour, who have been going through so much crap from the leadership. They even had their event rally put as cancelled on the app, and that was after a fight to even get it to take place. And I think it's absolutely shameful the way young members have been treated by the party. So I just want to put that on record as well. But yeah, finally, find spaces where you can campaign, and it might not necessarily be the Labour Party because of a local situation, but always know that the Labour Party is something that we have to fight for, we have to recruit, we need to bring people with us. Yeah, you might get into some awkward conversations with other people, but deal with it in a comradely way if possible, but for the sake of your mental health, don't overdo it. There's other ways to always be involved.
I'm gonna use my the fact that I've got a mic in hand privileges to come to that one as well. Of course, they're putting up barriers. Like, this isn't just in the Labour Party, this is across movements as well, because people are really shit scared of young people because we just say it how it is. And we're like at the forefront of experiencing so many of these issues that we want to see radical change, and we're going to demand it, and we're going to keep fighting for it. And we've got bloody years to keep doing that. So I think, we have to expect that they're going to do this, and they're going to use the bureaucracy and use every power that they have and every lever that they have to put up all of these barriers. So I think we have to go in this knowing that we're going to face this, knowing that it's going to be really hard. But also, amongst ourselves, I know we've got some, not so young allies in the room. And what I would say to you is please don't compartmentalise young people. So I think often I get young members coming up to me saying, I was asked to run for youth officer. And that's great, that's amazing. And if you want to be a youth officer, brilliant. But they say, I wanted to do something else. I wanted to run for secretary. I wanted to, be a campaigns mobiliser. And I think it's really important you recognise that young people aren't just young. We're we have whole other things going on, and we're very capable of organising around other things. So I think just always make sure you're thinking, how can I expand this space? How can we bring in more young people? And how can we make sure that this is a space where young people know that they are valued and that they are treated just like any other activists? I think that's so important, and that's not currently happening in the Labour Party. So we need everybody to keep up the fight. Next question. Oh, there's so many to choose from. I'm going to come down here.
Thank you, and thanks, comrades. Just following on from that, really, and obviously, because Jess is obviously Young Labour chair, but I'd also like to hear from others. And the question is, how does young Labour become a pole of attraction for people back into the party. Obviously, anecdotally, a lot of people I've met at TWT, some have left in recent times. If there is to be a struggle within the party, can young Labour, putting in the context as well with the sort of bureaucratic challenges as well with that, can young Labour be a pole of attraction in that party as well?
Okay, I've been roped into participating. Yeah, this is a brilliant question, and I think in Young Labour we are pretty agreed that I think young people care about policies. They care about people saying, "I'm standing up for this, and this is what we need, and we're going to fight for it." So we have been roped into kind of fighting like bureaucracy and processes, but that's not really what we want to be spending our energy doing, because young people are out there and they don't want to hear about bloody rule changes in the Labour Party. They want to hear about what we're doing to demand climate justice. They want to hear about what we're doing to tackle all of the issues that they're facing in the community, the housing crisis, racism. They want to know how we are going to support them. Are we going to be part of those movements? Are we going to be there alongside them, shoulder to shoulder in those struggles? And that's exactly what Young Labour is going to be prioritising doing. And I think in terms of, policies, the Labour Party is sort of, backtracking, shying away from issues that we're talking about, but we're refusing to back away from those issues. I think that's partly why they really dislike us, because we have the ideas, we have the solutions, and they're like, that's too radical, we can't talk about that. But we are going to keep doing that. So, holding our rally, which we managed to do despite such staunch opposition and such a huge push for us to remove our speakers that we had chosen who represent what young people want to see, who are talking about the issues that young people want to talk about. We did that anyway, and we have big up Unite, who gave us their venue, so we were able to do that, and able to have Jeremy Corbyn there, able to have Palestine Solidarity campaign there. And so I think, my answer to that is we will keep mobilising, and we will keep up the fight and keep being the voice for young people, and we'll keep listening and organising.
Jess pretty much covered it all. The way how I'll respond to this question, a really good question as well, is, I almost left the Labour Party. I was very close to leaving, and then, people around me convinced me to stay so we can keep on fighting. Obviously, we were all saddened about the results, especially, to be honest, I was more sad that Corbyn stepped down than the results. But anyway, but I think, for me, for someone who actually was in that process of wanting to leave, and how I ended up being on the committee, although I only just got elected, I think it's the people that you're willing to work with. And I think I wouldn't have taken that step to stand for the BAME of Soros, particularly that I'm from Sheffield in the north, where a lot of the roles are occupied by people who are in London or elsewhere in the country that is not Sheffield. So for me, it's the people that, if I was to stand, who am I going to be standing with? And it's the likes of Jess, Fraser, Nabila, and everyone else from Mila who helped him to stand and, who supported me. So I think it's important who we surround ourselves, the companions that we have with us. That's what kept me going. But also, as a campaigner for Black Lives Matter, that's something really core for me. That's really important. And although we were really offended, I remember the conversation having with my team about, how can we even be Labour members when the leadership, calls our movement a moment? That really hit us hard. And I remember the backlash that I got with my CLPs when I told them, that was just a waste man move. How can he just say that? And we need to respond. We can't just be quiet. So in terms of for us, if we're not in it, we can't fight for our people. So I think that's why we have to be resilient. And Zarah mentioned that I think is really important is our mental health is really key. So we can't do everything, but as long as, when we know there's not worth fighting this particular struggle, then we'll step back. In terms of in the near future, what I would love to see with Young Labour, and hence why I'm part of the committee, is, us campaigning on stuff like Green New Deal. We led the way when it came to the Palestine motion passing last night. Do you know what I mean? So that was young people, and that was spoken globally. And I think we can do a lot more, from Green New Deal to housing to Black Lives Matter to tackling racism. And the fact that we are challenging the leadership, it just shows that we are doing the right thing. So we just have to keep on going and not lose focus on the shit with the leadership, and actually focus on the issues that are affecting our communities.
Just to briefly add to the points that Jess and Abdullah have made, when other parts of the party have now shifted rightwards, we have to recognise that Young Labour is one of the only left beacons within the party, and that's why they're getting the attacks that they do. When they stand up for the rights of the Palestinian people, when they stand up to racism, when they call out the party for not taking enough action against transphobia, they are showing the failures of the leadership, and they're also showing how there is a lack of principles, there's a lack of vision, there's a lack of talent, there's a lack of ideas from the right of the party, and it's on the left where all of these ideas and actually the policies that Young Labour advocates have broad support in the country. They're wildly popular, and it threatens the party's status quo with the leadership within it. And I think that's what it's about. So we should take inspiration in the fact that we are on the right side, we have the right argument, we have the principles and everything else, and that's why they attack us. And I'm not sure that's like the best argument to like recruit people. Like, hey, they hate us because we're right, but they hate us because we're right. And literally. So it's important that we encourage people to join the party. Those who are left, I'm begging you, please come back. Please, 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 please come back. We need you. This is not the time. This is not the time. It's never the time. This is not the time to retreat from the party. When we look at the scale of the crises we face, we need to have zero carbon emissions by 2030. That's what we need. We need to be looking at the crisis of, further education, higher education in our country, the housing crisis. We've just had a government that's hiked up national insurance, that's taken away £20 a week from the poorest people in the country. We have more food banks than McDonald's restaurants. What are we going to do if we're not fighting for policies to help working class people within the Labour Party? So please come back, please organise, and Young Labour is at the forefront of that fight, and we need to get more young people organised and fight in the good fight wherever it takes place.
Okay, can we take the next question? I think it was this person over here I was coming to.
Hi, Catherine Johnson, Hackney North. Yes, please come back if you've left. Couple of practical points. First, if you're a socialist, you must be in a trade union, and you don't have to be in work to be in a trade union. There's Unite Community there, you can still organise. Secondly, if you are in the Labour Party, you need to make sure on your account it says which union you're in, so we can use those networks. Now I maybe want to say something that might be a bit controversial in this meeting, which is actually, I think the biggest division is between socialists who want to be campaigning, dynamic organisers, taking up issues, rather than between young or older, or black or brown or white. I think the division between working class and not working class is a huge thing. And also that we are not raising class enough, that actually equalities, while it came from the left and the dynamic left to fight for equalities, it's being used against us and used to divide us. And we have to be careful not to allow that. So don't dismiss all the older people. And until my arthritis set in 2 years ago, I was still 16. So yes, let's keep going, but look for the dynamic people who want to campaign and organise where you are, and work with those and keep trying to pull others in. Thanks.
We're accepting honorary young member applications. I'll pass to Keir for that one.
Yeah, like I said, it's when we look at these things, we're looking at them. These are sort of trends, and when you look at the overlap of age and voting for Conservative, it just does go up from and so the over 65s voted, up to sort of like 65 to 70% for the Conservative Party, and so the people who didn't vote the Conservative Party, that is a lot of people, right? We're talking about millions and millions of people, and the fact that older people had been tending to vote for the right, that doesn't mean, it's not because they're old. right? Their material interests have been shaped by a deliberate political project from the 1980s. That's why they had the right to buy, to sell off council houses, right? It was because we need to create conservatives. We need to get people to have property so that they start to think of themselves as property owners rather than workers, you know? If it was created by a deliberate political project, we can undo that by a deliberate political project, and that's what we need to do. And just to talk a little bit about the previous sort of discussion we were having as well, like we have to keep in mind, right, that when I said we need a massive democratization of society, what we're seeing is a rollback of democracy around the world. And the rollback of democracy within the Labour Party, the introduction of voter ID by the Conservative Party, the absolute wave of anti-democratic legislation going through the US, you know, that is because they are absolutely petrified of what's coming. And let's face it, in the UK, 2017 election, even though he didn't win, the way that election went and the way Jeremy got that huge swing towards him, that scared the absolute living shit out of the establishment. And they did everything they could. They've done everything. We saw the 2019 election. The establishment, the media were absolutely united. All democratic norms thrown out the window. You know, the press behaving in ways absolutely ridiculous even for them. All of that is because of the potential of this particular moment, right? Because we have this huge crisis. We've got economic crisis, we've got a climate crisis, and we've got huge trends pushing people towards the left. That, when you come under attack, it's because they are scared, and the potential is there for something really, really dramatic change to happen over the next 10 to 20 years.
Hi, I wanted to ask a question about the next election. So I find one of the biggest threats in the UK now is the fact that the Reform Party will probably try and do a deal with the Tories at the next election. And that could end up with a kind of far-right part to our government. And we lost a lot of red wall seats. And I think the only way I view that the left can win the next election and our voices can be probably heard is to do an electoral alliance. I know we have a lot of differences with different parties, but we also have a lot of differences within our own parties. What will it take for Labour to be able to open up the dialogue, to kind of sit down in certain seats where we have no chance of winning and join together and have a left-led government finally, and then change English politics, well, the UK politics?
Thank you for that question. I'll take it first. I don't think the Labour Party needs to take part in any kind of electoral alliance. I think we have the policies, and we showed in 2017, to win huge popular support across the country. If we didn't have certain elements of our party self-sabotaging within to stop that from happening, we could have potentially gone all the way. So when we think of the next general election, when that will happen, you know, some people are speculating next year, some people are speculating later, and I've read enough Twitter threads to know that no one knows when it's going to happen. And I think when it does, we need to look at what we previously stood for. I was very proud to stand on the 2019 manifesto, and while that is a good place to build from, we know that the scale of poverty in this country is going to be much worse. When we look at what we need to be demanding for in terms of a Green New Deal, that also needs to be much bigger and much bolder, because it will be worse by then. But we shouldn't lose track of all the gains we've already made. We need to be building on that, and I would say that the Labour Party doesn't need any other party to form a coalition with, because we can get a majority if we're confident in our politics, if we're responding to the material interests of the people in this country, and if we're giving them a vision of hope. We can do it with a good leadership that knows what it's doing as well.
All right, thank you. Yes, this person over here.
Hi, Ben from Green New Deal Rising. What I haven't heard much on this panel so far is really addressing the mental health crisis that many youth are going through, and it really touches on what we were talking about like why there is this huge surge in right-wing extremism in young people, and it's because we're just facing along with the economic and the climate crisis, there really is just a mental health epidemic among young people right now. Our total disconnection from nature, the fact that we're all thinking that, by 2050 we're only going to be 50 and we're going to be dealing with the climate catastrophe, and looking at the current state of politics and not seeing much hope, especially in the Labour leadership. So maybe if I could get a feel from the panellists to their take on this mental health epidemic and maybe what solutions we may be able to find to deal with that, because it is so essential in mobilisation and in fighting against the beating into submission that leads to inaction among young people. Thank you.
I'm going to chip in here. So I've worked in mental health services. I was a youth worker for 7 years. Well, I still am. I don't know why I said was. It's just been here for a few days. I suddenly feel really far removed from it. So I have worked in mental health for a while, and you're absolutely right. There is a hideous situation that young people are being left in because these services have obviously been completely chipped away at by Tory austerity. And you look at the kind of budgets that are allocated to young people's mental health services in terms of early intervention, and there's basically nothing there. All of the money is thrown at kind of crisis support, which means that we basically leave young people to get worse and worse and worse to the point of crisis where they take drastic action to get support. And young people come to me and they will say, I have to do something to try and get seen. What kind of country do we live in where young people are saying that when they acknowledge that the services won't look at them or can't look at them or don't have the resources for them unless they try to take their own life? That's a hideous situation that we're in. And what we do about that is obviously really difficult because, Tory austerity has pulled the resources away from every community. And they've obviously been pushed as well into these kind of ring-fenced services that are kind of a one-size-fits-all, really inaccessible and not suitable for the challenges that young people are facing. So I think in terms of the mental health services themselves, we need to obviously be demanding funding, but it can't just stop there. We need to be embedding young people within how these services are set up and how they're structured. Why are we not consulting young people on what they need? Where are young people's voices in the decision-making processes of services that are designed for them? So that's absolutely something that we should be championing in Labour that does not get talked about enough. And I think something was said at a youth zone event the other day, and it was the phrase was we go begging for scraps from the Tories for mental health services. Why are we begging for scraps? Why aren't we demanding? Why aren't we going in there and talking about how this is a huge injustice? And why aren't we amplifying the voice of young people who are being left out in the cold? So absolutely, we need to be talking about this a lot more, and we need to be demanding, not begging.
There's a lot of reasons why someone might have ill mental health. And when I think of some of the situations that cause it, young people are in disproportionately low-paid work, and that financial burden that has obviously escalated during the pandemic, that's one thing. So if we had better pay and if we had better jobs, that would help. If we didn't have the housing crisis where extortionate rents are being demanded from young people disproportionately, so that would also help. When we look at our education system, when we look at how higher education, the entire model is broken, but also throughout our education, whether it's primary school, secondary school, teachers are so overworked, schools don't have the resources. Imagine if we placed emphasis on good mental well-being right from the get-go. So when we think of mental health, I think it's really important to not box it into just, this one specific area. It needs to fall into all policy areas, because if you have a good, good education system, if you have affordable homes for everyone, and you have a huge council building program, if you have, if work truly paid a living wage and so much more, if we had a 4-day working week and a 3-day weekend, all of these things would improve people's well-being, and we wouldn't have the scale of the crisis that we do. So I think we need to look across all policy areas and be demanding that we shouldn't be working the hours that we do. Young people shouldn't be working those hours. They shouldn't be getting paid fuck all for them as well in the same way. And I think that will be a step forward. And of course, asking for more funding so it's on parity with NHS funding, looking at things around around eating disorders, which have also worsened over the course of the pandemic. You know, the waiting lists are huge and people are having to find private means to access it. But if you don't have money, what do you do? And when you're ringing for help, they're literally like, if you're not suicidal, I'm really sorry, we can't help you. We are the 6th largest economy in the world. There is enough money for this. It's just, you know, the political will isn't there. But if we want to go to war with the country in the global south, trust me, it will happen as soon as they want it. But this is about political priorities, and I think we just need to be fighting for that every step of the way.
You know, this is a really important question because I echo everything that's been mentioned already. So in 2018, I lost a friend because of suicide, and I remember when I was speaking to him before that, I spoke to him 2 months before it happened, and a month before it happened. And I remember like the whole year we were on the same course together, and I remember the issues that we were facing, especially as young black. Well, he's Christian, but I'm Muslim as well. But so like, being young, being black, and being part of a faith group, and you know, knowing that there's no services there provided for your specific community, for your color, for your particular faith group as well. It's a lot to take in. I definitely echo in terms of the wages as well are really ridiculous right now for young people. I remember whilst I was being a student, I was doing 2 part-time jobs and doing my full-time, and I was doing other volunteering and stuff, and I was getting involved with my, you know, local like socialist groups and all sorts, and had family responsibility. So, you know, it's the pressure that are on young people is absolutely ridiculous. But something that needs to be questioned here as well is when we talk about providing resources, it needs to fit the right resources for the right people as well, because that's a huge issue. You know, when I remember when I was part of the liberation group as a student, you know, like the service that was provided, they were waiting, like the different liberation groups, specifically the LGBT plus community, the support, the waiting time for them was a lot more than any other community. And then when I would speak to young Muslim women as well, there was absolutely no support for them. So I think like we need to actually look as well in what support is available. In Sheffield, I'm friends with an organisation that set up a youth mental health kind of charity organisation where they get young people together and they do socials, and they get the young people to lead the sessions as well. They get them to open up about their mental health. But when it comes to wanting funding, the very basic needs of funding for events or initiatives, you know, the council are the last to come and support them, or any organisation, they just don't get the support. So even the organisations that are underground, they're limited with resources, and that's something that we need to challenge, and hopefully a Labour socialist government can do that.
All right, I think I've got time for one more question, so make it a good one. Let's see, hands. I'm going to... Sunglasses.
Hi. I guess my question is that this has happened before, right? The idea of a generation left, and that generation was the 68 generation, who, as we know now, are fundamentally, as we've been talking about, one of the most right-wing generations in history. And everything seemed to be on their side. You know, you had the threat of nuclear war, you had Vietnam, you had kind of, I guess, differently, you had a period of economic prosperity, but you had this period, and you had these people who, for a long time when they were young, were incredibly left-wing, radical, wanting to change the world, and now they're in power. So what do we do to stop that from happening to us? How do we ensure that this maintains throughout, you know, our lives, basically?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And so the last time there was, the last historical period when there was lots of talk about generation gap was in the 60s and early 70s. That didn't actually show up in terms of the voting statistics, or not as dramatically. And so it was, in a way, it was a large minority of young people who were sort of tied up in the movements of that day. Through the 70s, actually, those movements started to spread, and things which were quite small in the 60s started to become much more popular. But something happened. We were defeated, unfortunately. We were defeated by Thatcherism, and you know, that defeat, it had a violent component. I grew up in a mining village or town in South Wales, and I remember the miners' strike, and there were like 20, 30 police vans. It was under occupation, and it was very violent, and that was part of how we were defeated. But there was another part, and that was, that people were bought off to a certain extent, i.e., the council housing that had been built up by generations, which were owned by all of us. We didn't all live in the same house, obviously, but it was owned by all of us. That sort of got sold off, and so, the whole right to buy your council house, you get sold off at like 30% of market value. So it's a huge giveaway. It's a bribe, and that bribe sort of accelerated and changed the economy. There's no room there to do that to young people today, and that's not particularly good. I don't know whether you want a bribe or whether you take it, but it's not going to happen because the economics are not there for it. So that sort of thing is not going to happen. I think the bigger danger actually is probably linked to the last sort of question is, I think that the ruling class would quite like a demoralised and in fact depressed young working class, because the political effects of that would be that you would drop out of the political system. And so don't want to be glib about mental health problems, but having an active and strong left, which can give people some sort of idea that there is hope in the world, that is part of how we deal with the huge epidemic of like anxiety disorders and depression, basically.
There's not much to add to that, but I just wanted to add one thing. I think that there is also a real concerted attempt by the Conservative government to instill this idea of like individualism and pit young people against each other, pit neighbour against neighbour, and turn each other on ourselves. Just look at how the way that they treat young people in education. You're competing against your peers, do better than your peers. You need to get that space so that they don't beat you. And that's like the way that young people are kind of being taught to think about each other. And I think that's one of the biggest threats to us, because our biggest tools are our collective struggles, right? We are strongest when we're working together. We are strongest when we're standing shoulder to shoulder in our struggles. And that's exactly what they're trying to prevent, because it scares the shit out of them. So I think I would just say that's something we always need to be bringing into our spaces. So when we see kind of young people kind of being brought into this idea that we're against each other, that's something we've really got to challenge, because we've got a whole state structure instilling this idea that we're all against each other in young people, and I think that's a real threat. But also, obviously we've talked about the material conditions of young people, that we'll see beyond that. They will start to see there is a system working against them, that it is not fair, and we're in a situation where we need to work together to fight back against it. I think we are out of time for questions. So thanks so much for such brilliant questions and contributions. So I'm going to just ask each of the panelists just to give me a 1 minute or 2 minute, I don't mind, a little wrap up. What would you like to leave people with today?
The thing I want to leave is the generational split in politics is there, but it's our task to overcome it, basically. I'd probably just say that the thing again before that we've just been through this big wave, this big experiment with Jeremy Corbyn, and the huge wave of hope that happened around 2017, etc. We had a defeat, and now we're in a bit of a sort of lull. But the state of the world, the state of the economy, and the coming climate crisis, there is no knuckling down, following the rules, and having a nice, comfortable life, right? That is not on the table. Change is coming because of climate change, right? It's not a question of should we have change or not. Change is coming, right? We have to get in control of that change. We have to be the ones who are directing that change, because otherwise the world won't be pleasant. But we could get somewhere which could be a lot better than the situation we're in now.
Right. So I think, just quickly, look out for your comrades, burn out. We all know activists burn out. Support each other and make sure that we've retained all the amazing people that you actually have in your branches and your CLPs. And I think the last kind of thing I want to say is the left are really poor at celebrating wins. When we have them, we need to shout about them. So, like a branch of 2,000 workers in Glasgow, we've halted redundancies, we're demanding better pay, we've got a charter that we're going to get in, and we're going we are demanding better, and it's by collectively organising in your workplace that you will be able to change things. So when we're talking about the Green New Deal, when we're talking about a just transition, when we're talking about all these things, it's through collective power in your workplace that you will be able to achieve it.
I think we just have to keep on moving. It might not look like that we're going to win, but we are, and we have to keep fighting. And for me, I always remember the quotes of Malcolm X when it comes to organising and continuing to fight. So I'll leave you with the words of Malcolm X, and that is that we are declaring our rights on this earth to be human beings, to be respected human beings, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day. And we intend to bring the existence by any means necessary. So keep fighting, comrades, and we're going to win.
I can't really top a Malcolm X quote, but what I would say that it's very difficult to be within the Labour Party now. I completely get it, but in 2015, John McDonnell said that felt like the lowest point, the darkest hour for the left, and we saw what happened a couple of months after that when Jeremy miraculously made the ballot, and we had amazing years of a Labour leadership that had our policies and our principles. So what I would say is hold on, keep the faith, keep organising, because the Workers United will never be defeated.
There's not much more for me to add to that. I really hope you've enjoyed this session. Keep getting more left-wing and more radical with age. You've heard it here first. We will win. Those of you who didn't put your hand up when you I asked if you're in a trade union, go join a trade union.
And the Labour Party, if you're not a Labour Party member, come through.
Let's get together, let's fight back, and let's win. Enjoy your last day of TWT. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you to our amazing panelists.